Welcome back to another edition of Focus One. Today we're going to talk with Rita Ferrandino, the chair of the Sarasota Democratic Party. We'll be talking about the upcoming presidential election, of course, along with some of the other races on the November ticket. But I'm also going to solicit Rita's views on Governor Scott, the last two legislative sessions, and the current controversy in Sarasota over the consolidation of voting precincts. Nice to have you on the show, Rita.
Hey, great to be here, Frank. Thanks for having us.
Let's just start from the top with the 2012, the upcoming presidential election. How do you like President Obama's chances for a second term?
Well, President Barack Obama will be reelected, and I am here to guarantee that all eyes are going to be on the Sarasota-Manatee area and the I-4 corridor, and we're going to deliver a victory for President Obama.
With respect to the importance of our area, that's one that's easy for me to do, both here and in other places. It is part of the I-4 corridor. It is an area that can swing anywhere from, as we saw in Obama-McCain, it was almost a dead heat here in Sarasota, a little bit leaning towards McCain and Manatee County, but it could be upwards of sort of dead even to a 10-point swing for the Republicans. So most certainly we are in the swingiest part of the swingiest state in the nation. Why do you like his chances? Most pundits are saying this is going to be a really, really close race. Why are you so confident?
Well, I will tell you here, basically, locally, the president came within 221 votes in 2008 of carrying Sarasota County. And what's significant about that is that Sarasota is a Republican fundraising stronghold. The Republican Party has 44% of the voter registration here. So the fact that the president came so close, and it was closer than it has ever been in a presidential race since FDR, really says that the president has a lot of support here. You may remember Michelle Obama, the First Lady, came to Sarasota in January, and that really kicked off the season for us. And what I was incredibly pleased about was that at that event, we called all of the former supporters of the president's, their fundraising supporters, and we got 100% of them to recommit and to come out for the president. So we saw no drop off at all in the fundraising. We have seen absolutely no drop off in our own grassroots organization. We have been working grassroots in getting voter registrations to happen, to get people to understand why they need to vote by mail. And so I'm feeling really confident because our numbers are really strong at this moment.
So contrary to some of the conventional wisdom, you're not really seeing a drop-off in the enthusiasm of the grassroots support here in 2012 relative to 2008.
No, and I think that our lovely governor, Rick Scott, is only adding to the enthusiasm. This recent round of voter suppression has really gotten people to stand up and take notice. I think that our Republican GOP congressional friends and everything that they have been doing with the women, the violence against women, the problems that we saw with the Komen Foundation, the defunding of Planned Parenthood has really gotten an infusion of women to be interested in this presidential race because they see what's at stake. I also think that what we're seeing with the women is that we're seeing a lot of Republican and independent women going, oh my God, my right, I never thought I'd have to be fighting for my rights like this. We're going to get on board and join the president on his reelection.
Let me come back, because we'll come back to some of the, I think the changes to the election rules in Florida a little bit later in the program. But I want to bring the lens back up to, let me sort of give you a take on how I see the dueling narrative shaping up, or at least the primary narratives between Obama and Romney. I think from Romney's perspective, he wants the narrative to be about ineffective. It's been an ineffective first term for this president, and you need somebody new to take over. And I think the Obama narrative, he's trying to paint Romney as this is somebody that continues to protect the wealthy at the expense of everybody else. So protection of the few at the expense of the many. Obviously, Obama will defend himself on the effectiveness front, and obviously you'll see Romney again defending himself and trying to attack Obama on having his a close set of friends. But how do you see that? Would you agree with that assessment of this is the way that the primary narratives are shaping up? And I could suspect which narrative you prefer, but just give me your comments or thoughts.
Well, I do agree, and I think that what you're going to see with Romney, where he's going to really run into trouble, is people. I lived in Massachusetts when he was governor, and you do realize that he did not finish his term as governor, and his record in Massachusetts was really abysmal. He left the state in financial shambles. He really did not deliver, and he didn't fulfill his commitments. So I think that what we're going to see is that when Romney has to go to defending his record as a governor, it's going to really play poorly to him, and it shows that he couldn't deliver anything when he's not a newcomer. He was a governor, and he had a really bad record across the board. And people in Massachusetts, like myself, many of us were engaged in pretty serious fights against a lot of the legislation that he wanted to put through, because they really, he was cutting education, he was cutting investments in early education programs, in university education programs. His education policy was just awful. And that's going to be a thread that's important. We know what happened with health care with Romney, so I think he's going to have trouble defending that. And as far as the president's record, is that the president has been keeping his eye very much on the ball. I mean, he certainly has had a lot of challenges being thrown at him, but he's got a pretty progressive record.
He certainly dealt a difficult hand during his first term. With respect to what you're the most proud of, or what you see as the top accomplishments, if you had to rattle off 3 or 4, what would they be?
Well, I certainly think the LGBT community would say that taking a strong stance on don't ask, don't tell. I think that we have seen, the bailout of Detroit, and really showing that he was willing to stand up and do what the venture capitalists weren't willing to do, and that was he really saved the auto industry. And I think certainly his military command is well respected, and the fact is that he did bring home bin Laden, and he did it with really standing on his own decisions, and I think those would be the 3.
That the one that we just talked a little bit about this before the program. I think I have to just come back to it for a second, and that is the looming decision on the part of the Supreme Court. I mean, there was a lot of political capital that was expended in getting the health care legislation, the Affordable Health Care Act, through Congress, and now it's being challenged and under the Supreme Court. And I think in watching some of the hearings, it looks like the chances of that, the individual mandate being overturned are pretty good. But the administration has sort of taken a little bit of a defiant tone in that it's not going to happen. If it doesn't happen, they'll look certainly like they knew what they were talking about. But if the mandate does get overturned, what do you think the reaction is going to be among your rank and file members in the Democratic Party?
Well, our rank and file members are going to be angry, and they're going to become more and more motivated. And I think that what we're really seeing is that there's a lot of people talking about the Supreme Court being a completely biased, partisan body these days, and that I think that there are a lot of people on the Democratic side who will stand behind the president and work to get the president reelected just because of what's at stake with the Supreme Court in the next term, that they will not want to see a Republican president appointing Supreme Court justices, because it will take what we currently have, which is by many's estimation just really a disaster, and make it even worse, because those Supreme Court appointments that the next termed president will make will be young, and they will be affecting policy for a long time. And I think what we saw with Citizens United is what's causing a lot of that.
So you think that concern over the makeup of the Supreme Court, its current disposition, but potentially future changes, is going to be something that really motivates the
it's going to motivate the base. And there are a lot of people who are benefiting by some of the early healthcare legislative actions. You know, how many people here watching this show, you know, were affected by the donut hole and has seen that donut hole being closed as really having a positive effect on their daily lives.
Let's talk about Wisconsin for a second.
Yes, let's talk about Wisconsin.
We're here in Florida, but let's go up to the state, the land of cheese. Next week is a fairly important election next Tuesday, the recall of Governor Scott Walker. And you know, the pundits' sort of take on this race it's been a little tricky. Obviously, Walker went very hard after the unions. Union busting. Took a hard line, took a stance. There was certainly a strong reaction. It sort of galvanized a little bit of an opposition movement to get him again removed from office. It's a tight race. Right now, it looks like Walker is up by 5 to 7 points, so he might survive this. Now, if he were to lose, obviously that would be a huge victory and a momentum boost for the Democrats in Wisconsin and then I think nationwide. But if he holds on, I think one of the things that I know some members of the Democratic establishment were concerned about was that this would galvanize the Republicans, and then if they hold off the challenge, there's going to be a little bit of demoralization on the part of the rank and file in Wisconsin, and that might leak out a little bit beyond Wisconsin. Sort of that's a lot to throw at you, but are you concerned that there's going to be a downside to Walker holding a seat?
Well, first of all, I'll say, anybody who's interested in phone banking, our Democratic headquarters has been called by Wisconsin to come and do get out to vote phone calling on Monday, June 4th, and Monday, June 4th, and Tuesday, Election Day, June 5th. So come on down. We're going to have a big party, lots of donuts, and we're going to make calls into seniors in Wisconsin. So I think what's really significant about this race in Wisconsin is the amount of billionaire money just being bucketed, poured into that race. What really concerns me is that you've got all of this huge outside money coming in to defend this right-wing conservative agenda in Wisconsin. And I mean, what's the numbers are like astonishing. They spent $27 million in, what was it, a few weeks?
It's a huge number.
It's a huge number. And the question I really think is, are the people of Wisconsin going to be persuaded by the huge amounts of money being poured into just vicious campaigning?
There's a reason that people pour huge amounts of money into vicious campaigning. Usually that money helps persuade people.
Yeah, and I'm in the education industry professionally. Mm-hmm. I work in the education industry, and I have been privy to some of the negative campaigning that's going on attacking teachers. And basically what we have seen is that they're distributing flyers basically calling teachers radicals. And they made public the names of teachers who were signing a recall petition for Governor Scott. And there's just something really seriously wrong with a public school teacher not being able to have the freedom to sign a recall petition, and for fear that that's going to become public. So I just think that what's going on in Wisconsin is tragic. It's tragic to our democracy. It's completely divisive, and I fear that we're going to see more and more of this, and it's all goes back to that Citizens United Supreme Court decision, which lets unlimited corporate money into the game, and it's going to be decisive and destructive.
We had a show on campaign finance. Actually, I had a professor in here. It's up on our YouTube site. I want to pull the lens back to Florida for a second. And actually, I want to pull it in locally here. This is not a stronghold for the Democratic Party, but I would call this area of Florida sort of a slightly reddish-hued purple. I mean, it's definitely not a Republican, lockdown. But Democrats often come close, but it's hard for them to get over the hump. So we don't occupy a lot of state legislative seats or congressional seats, and most of local government positions are filled by Republicans. How do you like your slate coming up? Your slate of candidates. I know, not all of them are clear just yet, but just are you enthusiastic going into the 2012 elections in terms of we got Keith Fitzgerald running for Congress and taking on Congressman Buchanan, and we've got a few candidates jumping into the state legislative races. Just, how enthusiastic are you about the?
Well, I'm incredibly enthusiastic. In particular, let me just tell you what I think that the role of the Sarasota Democratic Party is. Because we have a voter registration of 44% Republicans to 32% Democrats, it is very hard for us to get local Democrats across the finish line, just because it takes a Democrat has to be able to convince Republicans and independents to cross over. So our job statewide is to hold down the margin. That if we can hold the margin here in Sarasota, it benefits the whole statewide ticket. So we're really focused on the presidency, we're focused on re-electing Senator Nelson, and we are incredibly bullish on the fact that Keith Fitzgerald's going to go to Congress, and that's largely because Vern Buchanan and the just onslaught of legal problems and ethical questions around him. For a lot of people in this congressional district, they're embarrassed that Vern Buchanan represents them. There is no reason that we have to have a congressman who leads the ethical question problem in the country.
State legislature, what do you think the chances are of picking up a state legislative seat somewhere here?
You got to stay tuned. We have qualifying ends June 8th, and we have a few surprises.
Oh, you can't tell me about any.
Absolutely, can't tell you about it. All right. Stay tuned. Have me back.
Let's shift gears into a controversy that's hit the papers in Sarasota over the last week, and it's a little bit. It's related, obviously, to. There's this dueling narratives about voter fraud versus voter suppression, and now again, sort of budgetary savings for consolidating some of the precincts. What has the Democrats so upset with respect to? The consolidation of the voting precincts in Sarasota?
Well, first of all, we want everybody to vote. And I think what we saw out of Rick Scott, our job-killing governor, was they took, in the last legislative session, they took the Obama playbook on how he won Florida and basically looked to legislatively make most of what happened, they took it away. Republicans have a very strong track record in voting by mail. So Governor Scott did nothing to vote by mail, left that intact because that's a Republican stronghold. Early voting, which we saw was 2 weeks, was where many of the minorities and the Hispanic vote, in particular the Sunday before the election. When you look at who voted the Sunday before the election, it was primarily the African American vote, like a very large percentage of the total African American vote did it on the Sunday before the election, because those people have, they've got work commitments on election day. It's more difficult to go. So the fact that what Governor Scott did was they took 2 weeks of early voting and condensed it. Here in Sarasota County, we have 1 week of early voting, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. with only one Sunday, which is guaranteed to hurt minority turnout. And so we're really worried about that. And then election day voting, with re-precincting in Sarasota County, what they did is they went from 156 precincts down to 98, which was a reduction of 40% of the precincts were consolidated. And what happens in a minority community is that when you move a polling place, if you've got a body of people who don't own cars, who have to be able to walk to get to vote, it's all of the research, and you probably know this research better than I, the further away the polling place is from where they live, the less likely they are to go. So the fact that in Newtown, in our African American community, they reduced the number of polling places, and the closest polling place to where a large majority of the voters are is 2 miles. Well, you know, it's a really long walk to get to the polling place in 2 miles. So we're going to do everything we can to use all of this voter suppression to simply get everybody even more engaged and committed to voting. And we're going to simply have to work harder to make sure people have rides who want to go vote.
Yep.
Because we're going to fight it.
To come back to my understanding specifically of the Newtown issue, that within the actual boundaries of Newtown, there were two voting two voting places. One of those was eliminated, and the voters are now sort of consolidated to a fewer number of districts. There are a lot of them that were on the outskirts were put into different precincts, so those are not necessarily closed down. But the point is, it's a fair point in that here in the United States, you know, we are creatures of habit, and so if you change the voting place and/or make it a little bit farther, especially if you don't own a personal vehicle, it does reduce the proportion of people that.
Well, and just getting people to know where their new polling place is. I mean, these often are not the people that have phones or email or ways to communicate with them to even know where the new place is to go to vote.
So you're going to try to, again, it's going to be an education campaign to try to prepare people for the changes.
The thing that the Obama campaign that everybody underestimates is the incredible grassroots organization that they have. And so what those people are, what our grassroots organizations are doing is they're already going out in those communities and they're already firing up and they're saying, look, we have to all pay attention this game. We have got to know where you're going to go vote. So it's going to be a big grassroots educational strategy to get people to know where and how to vote.
While we're on the voter suppression versus voter fraud issue, let me just come back to a story that was it's about a week old, but there's an effort, right, I think now on the part of the state to sort of purge non-citizens from the voter registration rolls. And my understanding of the way things work is that if I'm not a citizen, but if I come in and register to vote and check the box saying that I am a citizen, there's really, we just sort of take that at face value. And so there may in fact be a significant number of ineligible voters that have voted before. Does this trouble you, or do you have a problem with the way the state's going about?
Yeah, I have a big problem with how the state's going about it, because I've actually been the one doing the phone calling to these citizens who are being tagged as aliens. Mm-hmm. And what we're finding is that these are people, not only are they citizens, but they're former veterans that the methodology that our supervisor of election, again, how did Obama win Florida? He won it because large numbers of minorities and everyday citizens came out to vote for him. So when you start making huge purges to the voter base, you've got how many John Smiths? So there's a lot of concern that people are going to be taken off the rolls who are not formally being vetted, and the duplications of names is a serious problem. Then there's the problem of there's no rhyme or reason, there's no algorithms that the state is using that is valid about how they're doing this purging. And I know that the voters that I've called on that list from Sarasota, we did not find one non-citizen. And I think that the ACLU is working very diligently on trying to be able to sort of get this sort of random purging to end.
Do you think there should be any sort of check on the system of?
Absolutely, we should have a check. But what I'm not suggesting is that we're going to do it 5 months before a very close election. And, you know, what was the supervisor of elections for the state doing all this time? that they just decide they're going to purge, and it's not small numbers. You know, it's 180,000. I think that they're expecting it to go up to 300,000 people who are potentially being taken off the list and called aliens, with actually no substantial backup for why that's happening. And I think it's really wrong.
All right, now we're winding down. There's one thing that I skipped over I just want to come back to, and I'll keep it relatively brief, and that is the redistricting. We had the latest round of redistricting. It was in the wake of new constitutional amendments here in Florida. The congressional plan is still under a challenge. The House plan survived scrutiny on the part of the Supreme Court. The Senate plan was struck down, sent back. They redid it, and now it's been approved. What do you make of the whole? Are you satisfied with the way that the Supreme Court interpreted Amendments 5 and 6 or not?
Well, I think that what it did was put a lot of awareness in the public that they've got to pay attention to districting. And I think we got, again, a lot of momentum. The congressional seat that Keith Fitzgerald is running is just a wonderful example of how that congressional seat, formerly 13, which is now 16, is really being far better balanced. It's going to have a far better geography that can be represented. And so for
mostly
us,
Sarasota, Manatee.
it's really why Keith Fitzgerald can win the congressional seat now. So we're pleased with that.
As we hit the last minute or so, some of your parting thoughts on the 2012 election, any of the races here in Florida. How do you think Nelson's going to win? I mean, it's
I think Nelson is going to certainly win. I think that what we don't know is about this huge amount of super PAC money that's going to be poured into the state. Florida is a have to win for the GOP, so they have got to win Florida. The Democrats don't have to win Florida in order for the president to be reelected, but it's certainly important and key. So I think, hang on, we're going to have a really exciting next couple of months, and just don't believe all of those negative ads you're seeing on TV.
It'll be a carpet bombing.
It'll be a carpet bombing.
Sides,
so turn your TV off. Go out and
probably pretty.
Go out and go fishing.
Pretty good advice. Well, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on another edition of Focus One.